7556, check your transponder setting, mode 3 Alpha, 4750.
James Courthouse shows 25 miles separation.
Yeah, it's got more presently 30 miles.
Hello and welcome to Tomcat University, another fleet production by F-14 Calverton, all things Grumman. I want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. We got an awesome show lined up. Again, we got SMOKIN from the F-14 Tomcat demo team, our host, and we got SYPHIN, our host from the official F-14 Tomcat Radio Show, and he's joined by Todd, USS America, Catapult 3, and also Scott Banasaweicz, PC, BF-84, Jolly Rogers. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hey, hey.
SYPHIN, before we begin and turn this over, you know, I got to say, a couple of years ago, it started with you and I, and a couple of emails back and forth and some messages and putting a show together and getting some of this history out there. And phew, a couple of years later now, it's over 100,000 people supporting this. It's crazy. We have three shows. We got 2 fleet shows, this being one of them, Tomcat University, and your show, the official F-14 Tomcat Radio Show. And we have our community show now, Producers Cut podcast. And it is amazing to see this grow. It's amazing to think about tonight, the show, and our host. And he is someone quite special, someone historical, to say, in many ways with the F-14 program, being a Black Knight in Atsugi, Japan, to something even more special than that. That was heading up the F-14 Tomcat demo team. That's something special. I want to play a short clip here and something we could all listen to for a second. This is the takeoff roll of the last F-14 Tomcat demo. And your host tonight, you're going to hear him right now.
100 whistles off. 120. 140. There we go. Okay. 160. 180. 200. There's show center. There's 220. Call clear on the gear.
Hey, Lorenzo, it's Smokin' Joe, Ruzicka. Thanks for having me on again, man.
Yeah.
Well, we got a fantastic guest tonight. We got Eric SYPHIN McMullen, and Eric's got a fantastic history. Finished up, I believe, in Tomcats with VF-31, but Eric SYPHIN, I want you to kind of take us to the beginning. Give us a little bit of start, where you were in primary, and talk a little bit about going through VT-86 and then on up through the ranks to the rags. So give us a little bit of a background.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, it's great to see you again, SMOKIN. I haven't seen you since I was in the RAG and I was one of your students. So we're actually, I think, probably about the same age. My path to Tomcats was a little torturous, shall we say. I didn't say much about this on the first podcast with the original one with just Lorenzo, because we were talking about other stuff. But since you asked, I'll give you a little bit more of the detail. So I went to Officer Candidate School, graduated on Valentine's Day in 1997, and went straight across the street to aviation pre-flight. Went through that. It is kind of a long story, so I won't go into it too much. I had a bit of an issue in primary, which was when I had just gotten married, and I wasn't paying a lot of attention to my flight training. So I got what's called some downs. Anyone else ever got a down? Yeah, that means, yeah. So basically I wasn't, yeah, exactly, right?
I've given some downs too.
Exactly. So I got some opportunity to repeat a little bit of training there in primary. But then by the time I had gotten to advanced, I was doing awesome. Actually, I was right on track to select fighters, which is what I wanted to do. Another thing happened that I won't go into because it's kind of a mess. It was not really my fault. It really wasn't my fault. I didn't have any control over it. And I got to go spend some time in the fleet. So I went off to the USS Theodore Roosevelt for about 2.5 years as a JG, as a junior grade, as an O2. working in the strike ops office. So I was writing the air plan, writing the green sheet, basically helping run the carrier, which was kind of an interesting job. I got some really good FaceTime with the captain of the boat, another Tomcat guy. I am drawing a blank on his name right now. Anyway, good dude. And our admiral was also a Tomcat guy. Got some FaceTime with both of them, and they were like, "SYPHIN, what are you?" Actually, one of my name wasn't SYPHIN. Eric, what are you doing? Why are you not flying? I mean, like they basically asked it just like that. And I just kind of recognized I didn't really want to do anything else in the Navy other than fly. So I put in a request to go back to flight school, which is an unusual thing. If you've been kicked out of a training program, you can't go back. So I just put in a waiver. I mean, you can get a waiver for anything in the Navy, right? Well, I put in a waiver. And it actually, I got to go talk to Sinatra, the chief of Naval Air Training, and he approved my waiver. He said, "Yep, I think you got wronged. I think you'll do better this time." I was like, "Yes, I do. Yes, I will." So I got to go back to flight training. So they didn't, thankfully, put me all the way through preschool. They didn't make me do pre-flight and all that kind of stuff. I kind of started in the middle of primary somewhere. I kind of did a little short bit of primary and then intermediate, and went on to VT-86, which is the advanced squadron. Again, selected fighters. And this time, it's 2003. Tomcat community is sunsetting soon. And I was like, I really want to go to Tomcats, but it wasn't a good career choice. So I was like, okay, I'll go to Super Hornets. Fine, I'll do that. So I selected Super Hornets. I was actually one of the first guys in VT-86 to go straight to Super Hornets, get selected for that. Well, you may recall this, Joe. There was spring of 03. The T2 program went down for like about 6 months. I don't remember exactly what the situation was, but they had some kind of a jack skew problem on the vertical stabilizer. I think it was like the rudder trim.
Yeah.
It was like suddenly jack over or something like that. Anyway, so the whole T2 program went down. So those of us who had just finished at advanced, they're like, all right, you, all guys that had previously selected for Tomcats, you're not waiting anymore. You're going straight to the RAG because the RAG needs you now because we can't produce any more people. And hey, McMullen, you're going to Tomcats too. I was like, oh no, don't throw me in the briar patch. Yes, please. I mean, it's what I wanted anyway.
So you showed up to the RAG what year?
That was 03. SEER school was like February, so I guess it would have been like March of 03.
So for those that don't know, you typically go through primary training, which is, simple T-34 at the time, jet, really turboprop, and then you go to intermediate. At that point, you kind of select whether you're going to go jets or E2s, and then you switch over and you switch to either growlers, fighters, or at that time S3s. I don't know if S3s are still an option for you. And so you go through the fighter syllabus, and then we pick it up to where SYPHIN is now, and go into the actual RAG. That's the first time you actually get to see a Tomcat. I want to get your first impressions when you go to the RAG. I know what mine were back in '98, but kind of when you walk in the door, everybody's got the Tomcat patch on. There's a lot of swagger going on. It's NAS Oceana, master jet base. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I kind of don't remember my first impression because I'd actually lived there when I was on the Roosevelt in 99-01. I'd lived there and, of course, had the stupid idea of going out I was going to drive out to Oceana just to see the stuff. So, like, I'd actually walked around a little bit there, so I don't really remember what it was like. I do remember thinking, wow, I can't believe I actually made it back here. I do remember thinking that, and that was pretty cool. And so, and some guys like you, people who had been in my original flight school class back in 98, 99 timeframe, were now showing up as RAG instructors. And it was kind of interesting to see them, having already done their first fleet tour, that kind of thing. And I was a lieutenant already too. So I was going through, most of the guys going through the RAG, I don't know, like you, probably went through as an ensign or at least a JG, right? And
right.
So I was in 03 already. I was a 6-year 03 and
salty.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I'd done a couple deployments and got some fruit salad on my uniform, and so showing up, I was definitely a non-standard Cat 1. Cat 1 being a guy who had never flown the Tomcat before. So I got a little bit of attention for that at first. Of course, I was class leader immediately, and that's the way that works, right? So
right.
I got responsibility for, well, sort of responsibility for about 8 or 10 other people, and that was kind of cool. I really enjoyed it, but I remember thinking, just walking in the hangar there, I was like, I'm gonna fly that thing. That's so cool. And of course, as it works out, you go through ground school, and it's like the Navy has a way of making everything awesome and making it suck, right? So you're sitting in the computer room looking at the computer-based training for like 8 hours a day, and you're like, the buy die, right. So it makes the process kind of suck. And then we went on the first det down to Key West. We were going to go do, that's as they often did, the Cat 1s to go staff the air-to-air det for the squadron, for the classes that are ahead. So we were going to go just be the desk sitters and that kind of thing. And if possible, we were going to get some air navs knocked out of the way. And I did, actually. I got my first air nav there. I rode with, what is his name? Sacamando. Shorn, yeah. Who, of course, went on to be a Blue Angel.
And now Reserve Navy Admiral.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Admiral Shorn? Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well,
that's amazing. He's a good dude. I really enjoyed flying with him. That first flight, he's like, hey, where do you want to go? I'm like, I want to go fly the shuttle landing strip. So we flew up the coast, did a low approach. They don't even let you come close to touching down there. But, there was a shuttle on the pad. I mean, it was really cool. And did a low approach in there, came home, did some stuff out in the area, went supersonic. I remember thinking, like, this is in a D. Of course, I was a D guy. I was a D baby. I flew Ds the whole time. I didn't fly anything other than Ds. So, just look on the little number, 1.01. Oh, well, that's not very exciting. It was kind of cool to see, but,
cool.
That was neat. And then came home for a 610 knot break overhead, carrier break over Key West, which was pretty cool.
Only 610 knots. Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? He was really, really bagging it that day.
So you go through the RAG. You're a D guy. Can you talk to us a little bit about what made the D unique, particularly from a backseat perspective? I think that's where it's probably different than any of the other models. I mean, we can talk about all the differences in the models, but really the D was different from a backseat perspective. Can you tell us, give our audience a little bit of insight on that?
Yeah. And I recall I flew with you some. Were you qualified in the D also?
I did. I don't have a lot of time in the D, but I have a little bit.
Yeah. So keep me honest on this. I'm pretty sure. I mean, for all of us, it's been 16 years.
Believe me, you're the smartest guy in the room right now, so go for it.
There we go. So the D obviously had some significant differences, especially in the backseat. So basically all the avionics were different. I mean, the radio was different. The radar was obviously different. We had a digital, so the reason they called it the D, I mean, they originally, I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Lorenzo, they were thinking about calling it the C, but then they were like, well, it's going to be an all digital bus, and so let's just call it the D. And that was like 89, 90 timeframe when digital was the cool thing, right? So everything had to be digital. So it had a digital bus, what that meant is that all the systems had an analog to digital converter, and then all the data was transferred on the same digital bus, so you could access it from anywhere on the jet, which is pretty cool. So that was a brand new kind of concept in the early 90s. Even in the 2000s, as I was early 2000s, as I was flying it, it was still pretty awesome. We had baked into our system, of course, I didn't see this till we got over to the war, but we had JTIBS, which is Link 16 Joint Tactical Information Data System, which no other Tomcat had, and of course, no other Navy jets had at all at the time. So we were able to play in the Link 16 network, which was amazingly high SA, but also it meant that we were able to communicate on Link 16. So we had a completely unobstructed, clear net over as long as the link was able to do. So hundreds of miles if necessary. At times we could hear stuff in northern Iraq, but when we took off from the carrier, it was really amazing.
So for our audience, SYPHIN, if you're looking at a Tomcat, what's kind of one of the things you can look at to see whether it's a D versus an A or B?
Yeah. Okay. I have a really old model here. So Yes, this is my really cool, got it from the last fighter fling. It shoots little things. But right here on the regular Tomcat, we have a chin pod, right? So you guys had a TCS pod, television camera set. Right next to it on the D, there was a second chin pod. So there are actually two chin pods here. And we had what was called an ERST. That was, hold on, the infrared search and track system. And that was, I don't remember what's classified and what's not at this point, so I won't say too much. But anyway, it was in a specific band of infrared. Well, what we were tracking was the heating of a jet or a surface as it went through the air. And we could track that basically no matter how it was maneuvering, which was pretty cool. So even when, as you know, in our radar tactics, the AUG-9 had some deficiencies with when a jet was not coming straight at you or straight away from you, or not. Anyway, there were some aspect issues that were an issue. The APG-71 that we were flying with had a medium PRF, which was kind of an interleaved high frequency and low frequency pulse repetition rate. So it was kind of switching back and forth with them rapidly. So you could actually see kind of when they were at a really high aspect, but
guys in the beam.
Yeah, in the beam. Yeah. So the other thing was if we really were in a situation where we were really straight on the beam, the ERST could still track it because you can't hide skin friction. And so we would just follow them through. In fact, we talked about this in one of our episodes, flighting the F-22, when the F-22 was the hot new thing on the road, on the street. We flew against those out of a little bit farther north in Virginia, and that was actually kind of cool to be able to see what we could see. The ERST generally didn't produce a picture. I mean, it did produce a picture, but mostly what we used was symbology. Anyway, so on the outside of the jet, that's kind of like the most obvious thing. There are a couple other things too. We had along with an upgraded raw gear, which is the radar warning receiver set. We also had an ASPJ, which is an airborne self-protection jammer. So we actually had some capability to jam some of the air-to-air radars and mostly surface-to-air radars. So the kind of the more common surface-to-air sets, we got updates of that all the way through the end of the program, all through the program upgrade D05, which was right before we left on our last cruise. So we were getting updates to those capabilities, and I remember they have little bubbles. So you can't even see it on that model, but on the leading edge of the wing, on the trailing edge of the horizontal stabs, and on the right in the back aspect, also right next to the dump mast, we had some antennas and receivers that were there, part of that airborne self-protection jammer. It was a system that was kind of a black box. Honestly, you turned it on and you hoped it worked. You didn't really get any indication if it was or not. But it was nice. One time on our last Westpac deployment, which is 04, we were up in Alaska. We were up to a northern edge in Eelson, Alaska. And we were doing a low-level range. They have a really awesome, I don't know what they called it even, basically just a range that has actual emitters on it, enemy emitters on it. And after that flight, we had it off, and then we turned the SPJ on. After that flight, we went down to the lab and debriefed and saw what they saw. And as soon as we turned the SPJ on, they were like, "Where'd they go?" It was
cool. So Lorenzo, you wanted to jump in real quick.
I was just mentioning when he was talking about the F-22 Raptor, I mentioned about when he actually mentioned about the engagements that they had practiced off the coast of Virginia, and I just wanted to throw in your 2004 Nellis performance where you pulled the pants down on an F-22 Raptor. And I watched it today. I watched it today, and I just had to throw not only at it on the range with the F-22, but SMOKIN sealed the deal with Rocco out at Nellis, and that was just one of the most amazing demos you'll ever watch. Honestly, check it out on YouTube. Something incredible.
Vegas, baby, Vegas. what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. So SYPHIN, You mentioned, you're with VF-31, the Tomcatters, one of the last two Tomcat squadrons to still be kind of operational. Can you talk to us a little bit about what, that final workups was like, and then the final cruise, and then kind of coming back home? Just kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, it was quite bittersweet. I mean, we came back from our 04 cruise in, when was that, spring of 04? I forget. No. Anyway, we only had like 9 months in between those deployments. I don't remember. It was really quick. It was a quick turn. And so we didn't really have a lot of time to just kind of sit back and go, hey, let's enjoy the last couple months of Tomcat stuff, because, fighter fling was then we did get to go to fighter fling, so that was kind of cool. But the last fighter fling happened while we were on deployment. So we didn't get to go to that. In that period of time, I think is when the simulator shut down. And so it was getting to be kind of a weird thing at Oceana. I mean, we came back from that 04 cruise, and the RAG was getting ready to shut down. We got a couple more students out of the RAG, and then it was like we were the only show in town. It was really a very weird thing. We knew one thing was nice. We were both D squadrons, and so we had all the same parts. Now, 213 hadn't deployed in a decade or something like that at that point. I think
they've been sitting on the bench for a while, but so it's VF-213, the Black Lions. And just a quick point here, fighter fling, for those that don't know, was an annual, essentially a party, kind of like a ball, and it had a full lead up to it with sports and all this kind of stuff. So fighter fling was a big deal for the Tomcat community, where they present an award at the end called Mother. But we can go into that separately. But yeah, you guys were with 213, which is kind of unique to have a 2 Tomcats air wing this late in the game.
Yeah, I think the last 2 Tomcats deployment would have been like, I think the deployment that I was on with the Roosevelt was 99. That might have been one of the last ones. I don't think there were many after that, if any. I don't remember. But yeah, it was weird. I hadn't been on a flying deployment with two Tomcat squadrons before, so that was kind of cool. Sister squadron sort of thing. Of course, there's that sister squadron rivalry, which is nice. But the whole preparation, going out to Fallon, the workups process there, we got a whole lot of, this is the last time the Tomcat squadron will be doing X. I mean, it was like everything. This is the last time anyone's ever going to use.
You guys buy shirts?
Oh, yes, totally. Yeah, that one right there, actually, that right next to Lorenzo's head's one of them.
I wanted to mention was SMOKIN told me a great story about the air show. And SMOKIN, tell that story again about the air show and selling the T-shirts, and then SYPHIN, tell your story.
The 06 show, you mean?
Atsugi. Yeah.
Oh, at Sugi. Oh, yeah, totally. This is good. Go for it.
Well, my story is pretty simple. It's, in Japan, we would do the air show at NAF at Tsugi, which is the home base at that time. And they would open up the gates at 7, and there would be maybe, it seemed like 2,000, and that would be a conservative number, of Japanese nationals waiting to get in. And then as the gates open, there would be hundreds of those guys who were running with maybe $15,000, $20,000 worth of camera gear to get right in the middle of the air show so they could take photos. And then we made a ton of money, certainly, because the F-14 was a favorite over there, and they loved all the T-shirts and gi-dunk they could get.
Yeah, I remember when 154 left, and then 102 went through the RAG and went back with Super Hornets. It wasn't the same.
No.
Yeah, we pulled through there in 04 on that last Westpac cruise, and so you guys had been out of Japan for a year or two at that point. I don't remember how long it had been, but it had been a little while. And we pulled into Sasebo, I think it was, and we opened up the hangar, standard, carrier hangar day, and lots of people came out. We sold out of our gi-dunk, our Tomcat gi-dunk, in like 2 hours. we had no idea, and that funded our admins for like the rest of that cruise, which was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So an admin, for those of you who don't know, our squadrons, specifically Tomcat squadrons, but other squadrons too, will basically rent out a pretty awesome room at a hotel, usually like the penthouse if possible. And that's just like the place that the squadron goes to hang out. And anything, Sully would roll over in his grave. Well, he's not dead yet, but anyway, Sully would roll over. Hear he's saying this, but anything divided by 35 is free. So you get the most expensive thing and divide it among the air wing, among the squadron air crew, and that's just where you hang out for a few days. That's the base of operations. But basically that open hangar deck and selling our gear there in Sasebo to the Japanese. Wonderful, wonderful people, and they were just awesome. They just were so excited to hear the last stories, and I mean, we sold the fighter fling videos. I mean, it was just they really wanted anything to do with the Tomcat, and we gave them everything we could and sold it out, and that funded the rest of our cruise. Well, at least of our
that's awesome.
Our cruise.
So it's really cool to talk about the camaraderie. I think we should probably go on a deeper dive in that in a second, but I want to ask you a little bit about one of the capabilities that kind of came along at the end of the Tomcat life and see if you guys used it very much. Rover. Did you guys get to use Rover? And can you describe what Rover is and kind of what a little bit of a game changer it was, particularly in theater?
Yeah, it was an absolute game changer. And I gotta give props to Fun Malay, Mark Malay. Do you know Mark? You know Fun?
Everybody knows Fun.
You can't not know Fun, right? So he, as I understand it, he was quite the driver behind us getting that. They showed up. We were pulling into theater on that 0506 cruise, the last Iraq cruise, and they were bolting on these little tiny antennas on the outside. I mean, they were seriously like that big. They were not big. But what it allowed us to do, and I think it was because we were the D squadron, because we had the digital bus, it tapped into that bus, and whatever we were recording with the tape, so we had tapes that we recorded our flights with, most of the flight, if not all of the flight, depending on what kind of flight it was, little 8mm tapes, and they, whatever we were recording, we could also transmit via downlink to something on the ground. And it was relatively clear communication, but it was enough of a process that not just anyone could find it. And so we would talk to our guys on the ground, whoever we were talking to there, whichever unit we were talking to, and we'd coordinate the rover frequency, and we could basically broadcast what we were looking at to be able to help them see what we're seeing. And it was absolutely a game changer. I think I had like one box hop before we had Rover. And I remember how frustrating it was to try to describe what you're seeing when you're talking to and this is for those of you guys who don't do this. Imagine looking through a telescope at something that's like a couple miles away, and you're trying to describe which house you're talking about, and you're like, well, it's not the one on the left, it's the one on the right. Well, they don't know what you're talking about, and so that's what we're trying to do from 2 miles up, 2+ miles up, 2, 3, 4 miles up, depending on the slant range, and we're trying to do this with a little soda straw of the lantern, which is of course at the time a pretty good piece of gear, the infrared pod that we had, but it just made it very hard to describe, okay, you're talking about this building, you're talking about this building. As soon as you went, boop, okay, look at my lantern feed. And he's like, oh, no, not that one, the one to the left. Yeah, that's it. Boom. The whole process.
So basically, what you were able to do is to describe to the guy on the ground who's probably looking at a repeater on a Toughbook computer, what you're seeing, right? And then you guys just talk to each other and say, hey, this is confirmation of our target.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was very, very, very helpful. It sped up the process by, I don't know, 10 or 20 times probably. Flying at night, if you had like an ISLID, which the little laser, little Star Wars one kind of thing, if you could point at something, that made it easier. They could see that. But in the daytime, there's nowhere near that capability. And so just having them be able to see what you're looking at, you could go into the wide field, confirm that you're looking at the right general area. You got the talk on from them, and then see you in the narrow field, and suddenly they're like, oh yeah, that's me, I'm waving at you. I mean, it wasn't, that you can remember probably, lantern wasn't quite that awesome, but just about. And so you could go a couple of buildings to the right. That's the building you're looking at. There you go. Easy. And it made it really super simple. It really made sure it confirmed for the guys on the ground that we were looking at what they wanted us to be looking at. And it made our contact, our target confirmation significantly higher. Or if we weren't doing, and there's plenty of times we weren't doing actual targeting. It was just we're helping them clear an area or something like that. We were able to essentially be what is now much more simply done through a drone, actually. But we were essentially a manned drone. We were able to be that eye in the sky for them to help give them the security they wanted or needed, usually needed, and they gave them that.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, really, really, really well excellent. And like you said, it's just on a tough book. They had this little antenna. I saw the setup. It wasn't particularly complicated. Little tough book, little receiver, antenna, boom. Yeah, nice.
Awesome. Cool. Well, hey, I'm going to open up the floor for questions from around the room if you guys have some for SYPHIN.
I actually do. Kind of talking about the rover stuff. What was the delay time like between you looking at something and then them seeing it on the ground?
Oh, it was fast.
Okay.
It was like a television broadcast, essentially.
Oh, wow.
It was seriously line of sight delay. There might have been a bit of a processing delay, maybe half a second, but I mean, really, really quick.
And was there any like limitations with that? Like, is it all just line of sight?
It was line of sight.
You have to be okay. Cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
So if we could see them, that was really the point. I mean, if we couldn't see them, if we couldn't see them because of the line of sight limitation, it didn't really matter anyway.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There were sometimes I do seem to recall Mosul. I spent a lot of time orbiting over Mosul. I mean, like racetracks over Mosul. And Mosul is a good sized city. It's amazing. 16 years later, I can still kind of picture it in my head. But yeah, anyway, I remember there was a couple times we were on one side of the city and talking to, what was that, third ID, I think is who was there in Mosul at the time, and talking to them. They were asking us to look at something that they literally couldn't see. And so it was nice to be able to relay them something from a distance. But again, at 20-something thousand feet, 18,000, even whatever, that slant range was significantly far enough away over the horizon for them that us looking down was helpful to them, but they could still talk to us. So it was really cool. So
to kind of piggyback on that, I'm just thinking about, especially in Iraq, it being very urban style warfare. Did you run into any delays, any issues with that in an urban environment with buildings potentially being in the way of line of sight, things like that?
I don't recall. Now, of course, I never actually saw, I don't recall even ever seeing a recording of what they saw on the ground. So I never heard, of all the time I've talked to guys as I was doing stuff, I don't remember any saying, hey, we lost your feed, or, there's some interference or anything like that. It seemed to be worked as advertised, essentially.
That's awesome.
Pretty magic, really, yeah. This was Rover 3, as I recall. So I don't know about Rover 1 and 2. Maybe they just weren't quite ready for prime time or something. But the version we were using was straight up 100%, as best I could tell. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Who else has a question?
Yeah, SYPHIN, were you over in Iraq in 2004?
No, 04 was our Westpac cruise, so we didn't make it quite that far west. We got
when I was.
Yeah, no.
It's surreal being able to interview you because you interviewed me for my first interview. Right. So it's kind of like coming full circle. But I wanted to ask you, when I was TAD, I was temporary assigned duty to SEAL Team 3 at the time, and we were based in Bahrain, but we were mostly in Mosul, and we were in I guess the T, I can't think of the name of it. But anytime we had our FAC-A controllers controlling the airspace, I'm trying to say this without saying anything wrong, they would try and find out every single aircraft on station. And I will tell you, as we were trying to get an idea of the battle space and the airspace of what we had above, the FAC-A controller would say, what do we have? And we have a list of aircraft. And he said, is there a Tomcat in that group? And they could say, yeah, there's one, at 20,000 feet, or there's one, I mean, they knew exactly how far away you were, what your speed was, what your altitude was. And then they could call you and say, we're looking at, and they would give, they give you a 10-digit grid, I think, on a building or a sector and a graph. And you guys could nail that graph within 5 to 10 feet of what we were actually looking at.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. We
saw.
Honestly, the capability of the systems back then, even that many years ago already, was pretty eye-watering. I mean, we didn't feel like at the time there was a whole lot we wished the Tomcat could do that it couldn't do at that point with the D version that we were flying. Now, I can't speak to the A's and B's. I know that my friends in the B's were pretty happy with their B's in the air-to-ground mode. And even, as I understand it, SMOKIN could talk about this, I'm sure, but the flying the A with the Lantern was not that bad. The Lantern was a good piece of gear, honestly, is partly what happened. And then we had, what was it called? T3 or I forget exactly what it's called, but basically we could mensurate coordinates from the Lantern because we had a platform, we had a GPS built into the system as opposed to the bolt-on that the B had. Built into the Tomcat D model system was GPS, and so we could actually feed our position, our direct exact position into the Lantern system, which would then again talk back to the Tomcat, and we could mensurate coordinates from a Lantern image. So we could say, here is the exact 10-digit grid we're looking at.
Yes.
Is this what you want? Yep, that's what we want. Yep, perfect.
And it was a clear picture too.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. When we deployed in 04, 05, 06, with the 2 Tomcat squadrons with the VF-213 and ourselves, VF-31, we actually used, I don't know if this was common among 2 Tomcat deploying squadrons. I guess there really weren't any after 03, so maybe it was the only time it happened. I don't know. But we used a common call sign. So we used Black Cat because we were both black and both cats, and so we were Black Cats. And we actually had a decent number of mixed sections. So it was like, a VF-31 jet lead and a VF-213 -2, or vice versa. And we just went out as combined call signs. And I can't tell you the number of times I heard this one too, coming up on, I forgot the name of the common frequency of Iraq. I'm drawing a blank on the name.
Just call it, black frequency.
Black frequency. There we go.
What are you talking about?
The thing that everyone knew, but I can't remember the name right now. Black frequency. So I can't tell you the number of times they said, "Hey, is there a Black Cat on this frequency?" Because they just wanted to know, because someone was specifically knowing after we'd been there for a month or two, Black Cat meant Tomcat, and so we want the Black Cat. That happened.
Well, they would select
a number of
you
times
out of every other, and I'm like, and I already knew kind of, sort of, and I said, why are you choosing the Tomcat over the other ones? He said, speed and being able to stay on station. He said that was the biggest thing. He said the speed factor and the fact that you guys could loiter forever. Yeah. And they were happy to have you for CAS and close support missions, which you guys were phenomenal at.
There was one night we were over, I guess my geography is a little off. I can't remember, someplace east of Baghdad. We were
Basra?
Probably Basra. No, it's north of Basra, but it's still in the central part of the country, but on the eastern side, kind of over near Iran. I don't remember the name of the city offhand, but we were on our first, so what we would do, so carrier, hit the tanker, go up to the first place you have to do your operations, hit the tanker someplace over Iraq, go back and do your second part of your vulnerability window, hit the tanker again, go back to the boat. That was a kind of standard 5, 6, 7 hour flight, depending on how long the periods of time were exactly. We're on our first vol. So we tanked, we were talking to someone on the ground, And then we had TIC, Troops in Contact, reported on the other side of the country. So they were specifically requesting a Tomcat. And so we plugged in the burners, went across the entire country.
How far was that, you think? How far was that?
I honestly don't remember how big the country is. How big is the country? Like 300 miles?
It's about 340 at its widest spot, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's probably about 250 miles, I'd guess.
Right.
It was almost on the Syrian border we got to. So it was like border practically on nearly the wide part of the country. So I don't know, close to 300 miles? I don't know. It was a long way. Plugged in the burners, and I seriously had it running through my head. The fighter fling video. That's 40 minutes away. We'll be there in 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
That's what it felt like. And I was like, okay, we'll be there as fast as we possibly can. And we literally full burner across the country at 20,000 feet. Got on station. We actually were, I think, already flying the small diameter JDAMs, the 250-pound JDAMs, I think.
Right.
We were flying them. And that's what they wanted. And so we were going to be the very first people to drop the small JDAMs. Unfortunately, my mission computer crapped. And I couldn't get the coordinates, so my wingman dropped. But it was me and Kiki. I don't know if you remember Kiki Komar, but Kiki and I think, were the ones that were heading across the country there. And Kristen Rosie Youngluth was on our wing as the senior Rio in the section, and she got to drop the first small diameter. It's 500 pound. It's 500 pound JDAM. That's pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, but
Very cool.
but it was specifically they wanted the Tomcats because like you said, we get there quickly. We weren't going to run out of gas on the way across the country.
Speed.
Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah, I got a question on rag based, and I want to get Scott in here a second, get him to jump in. With SYPHIN, one of the pictures I've gotten from the rag is you have your instructors, and they're not just in the air crew. You'll also find them in the hangar with the maintainers and your chiefs walking around. And one of the things that the maintainers go through the rag as well, like Scott had went through VF 101 to, learn the ropes of a Tomcat. And, basically what I'm getting at, is there any signs, like Scott, when you were on deck with VF 84, was there a difference from VF 101 from the air crews and walk around on the jet with them versus the Stevie guy? And same thing with, you guys being in VF 101, being around your maintainers, your plane captains, your mechanics, they're learning, and you've all had squadron experience at the same time. So I'm wondering the differences, because not for nothing, the RAG has a pretty damn good safety record, honestly. For everyone technically learning and how sophisticated and dangerous everything is. Pretty damn good record, actually.
Like I told you before, man, there must have been some good leadership that went in, because I was there. I was in 101 in 1986, the spring. And there must have been some good leadership that came in after me, because I don't have a storybook RAG story for you. I was in the shack. I watched a lot of planes. I went to school, and that was it. I wasn't a part of a launch. I didn't get took by the hand and walked around and shown nothing. And then I got to 84, and that's where I got my hands dirty and, got down to it, and I deployed immediately. So, yeah, I just don't have nothing for the RAG, And plus, it's different experience on my side. And even maybe it changed, because it's weird just to hear SYPHIN talking about that the female was the first one to drop that bomb, because we didn't have females. I didn't strap a female in, and so that's cool to hear. But yeah, I just don't, and I wasn't there long. Ray, we had on another PC last episode, and it was 60 or 90 days tops. I don't think it could have been 90 days. So I wasn't even there long, I don't even think I met any air crew.
Wow. It sounds like labor, hands-on, helping out, get the squadron, keeping the wheels turning, jet engines making noise. But,
I mean, I think it was just something as simple as, okay, they're not going to be here long. We got a lot of dirty jets, so let's put them, lowest guy on the totem pole, right out of A school, washing jets and going to Framp school. And, you know, we did what we had to do, and we kept it pushing. So I don't have nothing bad to say. I just don't have any great stories.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And on the aircrew side of things, how long is your reg experience from the day you check in to the day you are handed your air wing, your squadron, your?
In my case, we checked in like mid-March, maybe late March. I don't remember exactly. And I was with the F-31 by early November. So like 7 months-ish, 7.5 months-ish.
Really fast. When I went through the RAG, it was about 15 months.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, but you had a little bit of a holding period, and
wow.
It took a while. So it fluctuates, but I would say 7 months is really fast. 15 months is probably on the long end. You shouldn't be in the RAG more than about a year.
Yeah, at that point, 03, it was like, hey, we need to get guys out to the squadrons because we're going to war pretty quick. And I think I was what do they call a Pri-A or something like that? I don't even know what they called it anymore, but the guys that were knowing they were going to a deploying squadron immediately, sort of thing. And I was the only D Rio in my class too. We had 2 D pilots and 1 D Rio, and we all knew, well, 2 of us were going to 31 and one didn't. But
yeah, that's a lot different than my RAG class. We had 8 pilots and 8 Rios, so you talk about 16 folks. Well,
we had the same. Just of that, only 3 of us were Ds. That's okay. I'm sorry.
Hey, I'd like to ask both of you a question, SYPHIN and Joe. So I'm learning here because I didn't even realize that for aircrew, the RAG was set up in an instructor-student type atmosphere. Am I correct by what you're saying, right? So there's sections that you had to. So that's how they decided when you're ready to get out of the RAG as an officer is when you complete this, and this, and they sign off on you. So they know you're good to go before you hit the fleet. Is that the general?
Yes, I can go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah. So there's actually, 4 different phases or 5 if you were a pilot. Basically the initial familiarization, and then you actually did some basic air-to-air
called
work.
It WCS, but it's like air-to-air radar, simple radar hops.
Yeah, so basically, just kind of learning how to work the systems, the actual weapons system stuff. And then we did air-to-ground work specifically, and then air-to-air work in terms of like basic fighter maneuvers kind of stuff, dogfighting type stuff. And then if they were pilots, then they went out to the boat for their carrier qualifications. So yeah, each phase, depending on how much fuel there was available, how many instructors there were available, how much time there was available in the jets. It could take a few months. It sounds like SMOKIN probably had some time in between some of those phases, but basically you had to get through a certain number of flights in each section. And there was, as I recall, was there like a kind of a graduation hop at the end of each phase? I kind of remember that.
Sounds right.
Yeah. And so all 4 of them you had to pass, obviously. They're not sending anyone up to the fleet who didn't pass all 4 of them, and or all 5 if you're a pilot. That's really important if you're a pilot to make it through the carrier qualifications. But yeah, basically that was it. So you had, I don't remember how many flights I had, probably, I'd be hard pressed to say, 50 flights, something like that.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah. Something along those lines. So you end up leaving the RAG with, less than 800 hours, less than 100 hours in the jet, something like that. Because, you're only counting your launch to landing time. So, and a lot of that is, you're doing BFM. Those are short flights. So some of that's really pretty quick. Probably about 100 hours or less, maybe even. I don't remember exactly, but something like that in those period of hours. A lot of simulator time, especially for Rios. We spent a huge amount of time practicing the intercept timeline, getting the mechanics that working the radar down, because of course that was our job. We're the radar intercept officer. So I guess we should be able to do it pretty well. We spent a lot of time in simulators, and I kind of felt like I had my own private simulator instructor because I was the only one going through the RAG at the time who was a D Rio. So basically I had this retired guy who just spent a lot of time with me and helping me understand how to operate a radar in a tactical environment. It was good. I probably spent easily 3 times as much time in the simulator as I did in the jet. It's about right, you think, SMOKIN?
I have a question for SMOKIN. As an instructor, looking at our young student, back when he had black hair and waved a nice flag out of Felix 101. But when we look at our student and you feel he's reached a point where, say, he's headed now, is part of his syllabus, we're going to send him to Key West for a detach, where he's going to do some BFM. Do you have a certain guilt conscious about yourself? The fact that you knew Paco was waiting in Florida in Key West with that F5 camouflaged, waiting to strip their ego, pull their pants down, and make them realize how much they actually have to learn. And the leadership goes beyond Oceania.
Well, so I mean, I see what you're saying, Lorenzo. I would say we were more collaborative. I felt like trying to be collaborative was a little bit better than just being a complete jerk as an instructor. And it's a crawl, walk, run kind of training syllabus. So you're crawling at first, you pass that stage, you get to where you can walk. And then when you get down to Key West, you're running for the most part. And most of the time, guys are going to make it through. And we check them off on, everybody gets an individual grade sheet per hop. And if they've got a good GPA, they continue to move down the syllabus line. So, you want to see guys have success. You don't want to make them fail. They've already gone through the flight school portion, and that's where those guys are the weed out guys in flight school. But once you get your wings, it's kind of a collaborative effort.
I want to spend a whole lot of money on us just getting wings. So
I want to ask both of you and SMOKIN, SYPHIN, did you ever have any, when you guys were in the RAG, did you ever have a pilot that didn't make it through CQ?
Didn't make it to or through CQ?
Didn't make it through CQ. Because I've seen pilots.
Yeah, one of my OCS classmates, a guy I went through officer candidate school with, I actually, interestingly, he was CQing at the boat on the Roosevelt when I was on the Roosevelt, not flying.
Right.
And named Sean. I don't remember his call sign because he was still in the RAG, but he ended up not CQing that first time. They sent him back. He got the retread. Sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. I think it really had to do with how much they considered it to be a safety issue. I mean, SMOKIN could talk about this more than I can, I'm sure.
Right.
In Sean's case, they sent him back, and he did qualify, and he did go off and do a successful, at least beginning of a Tomcat career. So there are success stories, but some cases the grades just aren't there, and they're like, we don't feel comfortable sending you to a fleet squadron. But right. SMOKIN, I don't know, how do they decide if they're going to give you a second chance or not? Do you know?
Yeah, so I would say most of the time it's probably 25% or so of the folks fail, DQ, disqualified the boat the first time. Mm-hmm. Majority of those guys get a second chance unless they've done something completely egregious. Mm-hmm. And then really only about 10% overall don't make it to the past the second qualification stage. We've had times where guys have actually gone out to the fleet and they weren't very good. And so they sent them back to the RAG just to do CQ a third time. Right. So I think, you're really trying to make sure that guys are safe. And because, at the end of the day, that's the difference between the Navy and the Air Force. The Navy lands on boats and the Air Force doesn't. So.
Right.
I don't know if you knew any guys like this. I'm sure you probably did, SMOKIN, but I knew a guy who was an E2 guy who started in Tomcats, DQ'd, and they're like, sorry, dude, it's just not going to happen for you. And they put him back to E2s. And he had a successful career with that. He actually did, I think he had made it up through squadron command. So it was a training squadron command, but it's squadron command. So a good pilot, obviously.
How the hell can you not land a Tomcat, but you could land an E2? You seen them E2 pilot video? That's sticking in the console. It's in his lap. And this is all within 1 second. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what's going on. Right over the fantail. A Tomcat is just, I don't know. I would think if you could land an E2 or a C2, I assume is the same thing. You could probably land a single engine Tomcat in, snow whiteout conditions.
Hey, Goldie, I think did you have an AUG-9 APG-71 question?
Yeah. So, Smokin, you were in both, right? You were in the A and the D.
Yes.
The big thing that, I've always been curious from a user's point of view, what did you run into that you liked about it, that you didn't like about, one or the other? It's always like curious to hear somebody's like side by side experiences with both of them. And then curious about taking an F-14A and using a lantern pod with it. That's super interesting to me because the D's already set up, ready to roll with like an actual,
plug and play.
right. Like an actual like display versus, the fishbowl in the A. I'd love to hear some thoughts about that,
Yeah. So I'll answer the first question real quick. The difference between the A and the D, in the A, everything's kind of manual levers or like a rolling drum. And so you gotta roll a drum and do a lot of maneuvering to get your Ruberg gold machine to work, right? That thing. In the D, you're just kind of sitting there on your hands and you look around, you're like, you know what? There's probably a button that if I look around and find that button and I hit it, it's going to do what I want it to do automatically.
Oh, wow. So like a huge ease of use for the user. That's what I was looking for.
So ergonomically, probably a little bit easier in the D than in the A for sure. Also, certainly a couple of maybe a generation or two step up from an avionics standpoint. And that goes from everything from hitting the right buttons to kind of the automaticness of it, if that's a term. And then, so I guess the other thing to think about on the A is nothing really was kind of integrated. So the integration piece was really the Rio. That's, you capture a target with the lantern and it's you and the pilot looking at that to verify that it's actually, that is your target, rather than like what SYPHIN said, being able to mensurate coordinates, hey, I'm looking at these coordinates that were given to me and that matches up with what I was able to get out of the system. So a little bit more of a manual lift on that. Now, a couple of things to note. The A originally has a fishbowl, the TID, which did have a lantern component to it. Certainly the picture wasn't great, but then as the 90s progressed, they switched nearly every one of the Tomcats from a fishbowl to what's called a PTID, a PTID, which is a flat screen. Made a huge difference in what the user would look at and see in terms of a TV picture for both the lantern and the TCS. So the A's that I flew had a PTID in it.
Yeah, that PTID was straight out of the D. Actually, they said, right, hey, we could put this on any Tomcat, and that's exactly what they did.
So you could literally see image in an original TID in the Rio.
You could.
Oh wow, I never knew that. That's awesome.
Not great. Certainly not great.
I imagine not.
Yeah, I mean, it's a green and black image, but if you search on the internet, you can find some of the old guys who kind of started out, they'll throw their chest out and say, we used to just use a TID.
That's awesome. It's basically like an old school Mac 1 or an Apple 1 monitor, the black with the green. I'd imagine that it would be, like
there was a little trap door
Trail
where you would feed the gerbil in the back behind there. And it's really hard when you're upside down. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, smoking. Tell me they at least took 5 circuit breakers out of the D.
I don't think so. I think they added circuit breakers.
Come on, man. I was terrified I was going to touch anything in the back seat because I know Keith said the right things. You guys might know. I remember if I was setting up for a night launch, sometimes I'd have to put filters on. Now I was working on A's, so what would I be putting filters on in the back seat? I don't remember names.
All the radar stuff, you would put it on the scope. I can't recall what else. There's a ECMD panel over here on the right side, some other stuff like that.
See, if I was your PC, I'd leave a breath mint right on the ejection seat for my air crew. Little breath mint, set up the cockpit, the filters. It's the way we rolled in '84, you know?
Wow.
I like it. I
Wow.
like it. So we're kind of coming up here on the hour. SYPHIN, give us a little bit of just a quick, where you are now and kind of talk a little bit about the podcast, and then we'll probably get to a wrap up mode.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I met this guy. That I don't know if I actually don't know what order where the screen's being ordered, but that guy on Instagram. Was it like 3 years ago now?
Who is that guy? Which guy?
Lorenzo.
So
I retired out of the Navy in 16. So I did my 20 years. Praise the Lord. Got my 20-year retirement and called it a day. So my last flying was actually a few years before that. Unfortunately, my last tour was at the Naval Postgraduate School. So that was a good gig for me. Got my master's degree and that kind of stuff. And retired, like I said, in 16. And then I actually am doing, fortunately, unfortunately, I don't know, nothing to do with aviation now. I'm actually a full-time missionary, if you can believe that. I work in Russia, of all places. So I had not been there a lot since the war started, but anyway, yeah, it's an interesting thing. So about 3 years ago, 2.5, something like that, years ago, during COVID stuff, early COVID stuff, I was on Instagram because I was bored like everybody else, right? And I found this Tomcat page. I was like, this is kind of interesting. I started commenting on some of the things he had posted, and we had kind of struck up a conversation. I was probably one of the few aircrew who was commenting. And he could obviously tell that I had some clue what I was talking about because I was correcting a couple things. Anyway, it was really cool conversation, and I really enjoyed getting the connection on there. And he started telling me about this crazy idea of having a podcast. I'm like, who's going to listen to that? Nobody wants to hear us talk about stuff like that. So, anyway,
you couldn't be more wrong, Simon.
I guess not. Holy cow! So we threw it together and did our first one. It was just me and Lorenzo and a couple maintainer guys. Did we have one or two that time? I forget. I don't remember. Just the one. Yeah. Okay. There we go. And kind of made it kind of probably a pretty boring show if you go back and listen to it. But it grew and grew, and we added a second co-host. So we got a pilot and a Rio now, and we've done a couple. We're into our second season, although it's kind of been a little more than 2 years. But anyway, it's fun. We just enjoy bringing people in from the community. We try to bring in some maintainers. We try to bring in some aviators. We're hopefully we're really recording our next one in a couple days here. Got a friend of mine. Do you know SMOKIN? Do you know Suede Pratt, 32 blade guy?
I think so.
Yeah, he went test, actually was his route out of Tomcats. He went Super Hornets, did a DH tour with Super Hornets and then test stuff. But anyway, friend of mine, and so that's the kind of people we've just been bringing in, people with some history in the community and having a conversation. So this has been fun. Didn't expect this to happen and was not at all anticipating this. So it's been fun. It's definitely, it's nice to pull back some memories. My kids have enjoyed hearing me talk about it some. Pulled out my helmet even, I'm sorry, sitting back there.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, it's been awesome to talk to you. We really like talking about the Tomcatters, about things like a Rover that a lot of folks didn't know about. So on behalf of our co-hosts, Rob and Scott and Aaron, I'm going to turn it back over to Lorenzo.
Yeah, thanks. It's been great to be with you guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, SMOKIN. If I just may approach the bench, sir, just real quick, 1 second. I want to tell you a little bit deeper about meeting SYPHIN. See, there was this infamous air show in 2006 at this place called Naval Air Station Oceana. You might have heard of it. Maybe you flew a Tomcat or two out of there.
One or two.
Maybe all he is wrenched, worked on, flew, touched, breathed, drooled over a Tomcat coming out of there. Well, so that day of the air show, our guest tonight, SYPHIN Lieutenant Eric McMullen, was in Felix 101. And in the front seat of Felix 101 was Scotty. Scotty is one of the finest F-14 pilots out there. Top Gun instructor. He's really is incredible guy in the front seat of the airplane. They get out there, they're ripping around in the sky doing the final fleet demo, and man, they pull all 4 jets up in a horseshoe. They bow them with canopies open, flag out. No finer moment in this country to be an American, short Rocco and SMOKIN the year before, and in that retro Grim Reaper coming by. And
Oh, good.
I don't want to say that SMOKIN's flag was a little more vibrant than yours in color. Got a shop, that's up to you guys. But
He did have a better visor. I'm just saying. I'm sorry.
That's
No,
true.
no disrespect.
The fleet visor is just a fleet visor. What can I say? It's not that awesome.
you know, they're out there ripping around in the sky. They come back down and they land, dump the jet out, they get out. I'm over in VIP waiting. And they come in full dress flight gear right out of the jet, sweating, jet still all soaking wet from ripping G's and all the vapes. So I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, oh, here comes the Tomcat cruise. I'm like, oh, wonder what they're going to be eating. There's a whole, like, you know, big whole smorgasbord out. I mean, steak, rah, Tomcats. So SYPHIN comes over and he grabs a plate and he goes over to the fruit salad bowl, starts throwing like peaches in there and watermelon and grapes. And I'm looking at him and I'm thinking to myself, I'm standing right behind Scotty and I'm like, you just were king of the sky, king of the, you coming down here, you should be looking for brontosaurus burgers to flint. This man's making a fruit salad.
Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. That's what I always say.
And you guys did not know each other then, right?
No, I don't remember this happening actually, but if he says so, I'll take his word.
In the video, I mean, I'm sure he's got to be in it because I videoed VIP tent a couple of times. There's a lot of air crews in there, honestly. And so, you know, when I had bumped into him in the future and he had told me he was with VF31 and then we started exchanging pictures and I seen the flag picture with Felix 101 and he's like, that's me. I'm like, wait a second. I shut the jet down. You were with Scotty and you got it. He's like, yep. And I'm like, the Scotty came in, they walked in together right into the VIP tent. And, you know, I guess I'm assuming before the show, you're not really digging a big breakfast because, you know, you're yanking some G's. So as soon as you land, meal's probably the first thing that hits you over the head like a club.
I don't remember.
Holy crap, I'm hungry. But awesome show tonight. I got to thank you guys. SMOKIN, absolutely outstanding job. Thank you again. And Aaron, great job. Looking forward to the edit with this producing it. Rob.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited to listen to it again.
Yeah. Everybody out there, you can find us on Instagram at F-14 Tomcat. And also, while you're there, you better give F-14 Tomcat Demo a follow, of course.
That's right. Big fighter.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Catch us on Facebook, on Discord, on YouTube, just about any platform. Ask Siri. I say it all the time. She's the biggest Tomcat fan. Just say, Siri, play the F-14 Tomcat Radio Show. It's simply that easy. Find our merch over at goldleaderatx.com. Geez, anything else I want to throw? Yeah, just one last pitch. About a happy birthday tonight to our boy, Lieutenant Keith Schomig, Virus.
Here, here.
Happy birthday, Virus.
Happy birthday, Virus.
Yeah, happy birthday, Virus.
That's Scott's boy. He's trying to think of the right words right now.
I just don't want to cry.
At a hockey game tonight.
No, hey, how about this before we wrap up? If you're in the tri-state area, currently just the weekdays, go to our beloved NAS Wildwood in New Jersey and support them, man. It's a great place to take the kids. You can bring your dog as long as it's a cool dog. Don't bring no crazy dogs. And they just put a new roof on the place. And go check them out. Support them.
Definitely. Definitely.
Scrub that hangar floor so we promise you your nice white shoes will stay white.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wear white shoes around these jets, that's your bad. I mean, really, that's your bad.
Unless you're in dress whites, and then it's okay.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one.
All right. Have a good night, everyone. Enjoy.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Alrighty.